So I guess we'll get started. Hi everyone, thank you for coming to hang out. I promise I don't bite, so the front rows, if you want to come forward. My name is Victoria Brown. I am with SCT Advisory. We are a consultancy that helps with RFPs, RFIs, decision making, if you need help building budgets or program plans, as well as implementation, requirements gathering, things like that. A little bit about my background to give you a little bit more context. So I've spent the last 15 years in the warehouse domain. I was an operations manager for Frito-Lay PepsiCo, as well as most recently the global distribution director for Nike for all of the international shipping. So now I've been with SCT for a few months and jumping right in and working on some pretty cool projects. So today I'm excited to talk to you guys about adventures in new to you technology. If it's been a while since you've refreshed any technology or you're just looking to understand what the marketplace looks like, some strategies for how to bring some of your executives along on that buying journey with you, as well as how you can approach that in a kind of a formatted, templated approach to that. So with that, our agenda for the day, so we're gonna start talking about how do you decide that it is time to look at a new to you technology. I say that because for some of us, we have technologies that maybe we just haven't updated in 5, 10, 15 plus years. And it can be a little bit daunting to just say, hey, look, like I don't know if we're keeping up with where we need to be in the marketplace right now. So let's go reevaluate where we're at and look at those. We're gonna go through how do we talk about the value story? What is it that your finance teams really want to know about what you're trying to do and what that means for the organization. And then we'll dive into how do you look at the landscape. When you've now decided I have a value proposition, there's a reason why I need to make a change or update things, how do I go about even understanding the marketplace? Because maybe it has changed so much and maybe it's been some time since your organization or yourself or your team has looked at any of those newer technologies. The good news is you're already here at a conference talking to a lot of different technologies to understand what they do and how they work. So that is the first step, so welcome. So when we talk about technology, it is a whole new world. Things change fast. And if you are not constantly staying on top of it, it's likely that the whole world has shifted around you. We all know that the last 5 years has been a total evolution in the way we run our businesses. Many of us had to switch to e-commerce. If we're a manufacturer, we had constraints on some of our shipping abroad. If we're working in transportation, we know how it was to try and find a container for a while there. So the world is constantly changing, but how do we stay up to speed and look at that? And so when we're looking at these emerging technologies, many of you have heard over the last couple of days a lot of these terminologies being thrown around. We're talking about robotics, we're talking about Internet of Things, we're talking about AI and how people are using ChatGPT to be more predictive. If you were in this morning's session, I know they were talking about teaching the algorithms based off of what you're already doing, but how do we understand what is the truth? When are we accepting what's just being told to us? So there's a lot going on. And if you're sitting there going, hold up, Victoria, I keep hearing these words, but I don't really understand what do I do next? It's a lot of buzzwords. That's where we want to help you understand, what is the true value? There is no one right answer. People are approaching all the different pain points in their supply chains using these in very different ways. But what we are seeing is because of that, there's a bunch of innovation popping up in the industry. I pulled a few, they were all press releases from different companies and just in the last couple of months. So what we're seeing is, Lineage just launched a food chain innovation contest 2 weeks over July. Diageo, which is a spirits company, they're trying to innovate around their water supply chain. We've got Tyson Foods, they're doing some competitions around innovation. And then we have Kenco, who has an innovation lab to test out a bunch of different technologies. And they did not know I was gonna shout them out today, but they're doing really interesting things because there isn't one right way to approach this. And so today we'll talk about how do you look at it, how do you look at the problems you might have and jump into that. But if you're sitting there going, okay, I'm still a little bit lost, don't worry. Across the industry, industry analyst firm IDC did a study. They wanted to understand who's mature, who's where in the market, and they really went through the different maturity models to understand who's still using Excel spreadsheets versus who is adapting and making repeatable processes and truly connecting their facility. And what they found was that 70% of the market is still at that earlier opportunistic and repeatable stage, and we're still trying to strive to move further right on this. And so today we're going to talk about how do we move further to the right and really grow our companies and our organizations and stay competitive. So some of the investment strategies that we like to look at is we have that business problem first, right? Like we need to know what is really causing us to stay up at night, what's keeping us awake, and what's having us really stressed out. I know if you were listening to the main stage earlier, some of the speakers were talking about some of the eras that they were, I'm talking about the women's panel. I know Amy was mentioning, during COVID, how they were keeping the lights on and the strategies of pulling things forward. How do we create the plan around that? What do we look at as the problem? But what do we have today? What's the capabilities that we employ today that are going to help us move forward? And if we have those gaps, let's spot them early, because that's how we're going to fill in those gaps. And so obviously we've talked about there's emerging ecosystems, there's changes in technology. How do we stay up to speed? And so the other burning platform in the room is the cost of the actual freight. Yesterday on the main stage, we mentioned the Logistics Management Index. This is produced every month by CSCMP, so it is something that you can keep an eye on to see the cost of freight and how it's changing. So we know that we have to change. So what are we going to do? So Gemba mindset, right? Like we all know it, as we've gone through our years of education, it's looking at the processes we do today and asking yourself, well, why? Why do we do it that way? Is there something we're looking at that doesn't make sense? Are we being redundant? Are we doing things multiple touches on systems that maybe we shouldn't be? And once you've made that list for yourself, keep that list live. Keep that a living list in your organization. There's so many times when we have turnover in our organizations, when people move on, and we've now lost sight of the ideas that we've had over the years, where someone spotted something and said, hey, look, like, I don't understand why we do it this way. Is there a better way? So keep that as a living list. From that list, we often talk about that as being an opportunity assessment. This is some of the different ways in which I know today we work with some of our clients on how do we understand what are our gaps, how are we going to approach them. These opportunity assessments are great because you might be doing some things amazing, but it's hurting something else. If you don't have a balanced scorecard where maybe your idea is, okay, we want 99.9% fulfillment to our customer with this service level, but we want to lower our on-hand inventory. That's a balanced scorecard. That's where we have to make our trade-offs and understand what we're giving up to gain that. So having that list of opportunities is really going to help you have those really candid conversations with your counterparts across procurement, warehousing, transportation, and so on down the list to have a realistic view of what you're trying to accomplish. So this is just a few different examples, and we'll dive into some of these, but any questions before I keep going? I know I speak fast, so feel free to ask questions as we go. Okay. So how do we create a value story? Now we know we have some problems. We have this long laundry list of things we think we do a little bit weird. How do we create the value story? Understanding what your organization values is important. If your organization is all about ROI, let's talk about it in terms of ROI. If your organization has a burning platform, so maybe you have something that's going to be a risk, maybe you have an old sorter in your facility that's about to explode and it could go any day, maybe you have a carrier that their service levels haven't been maintaining where you want them to be. What is the risk of not having this conversation? And make that be a really important conversation with your finance team. I early in my career was working at a facility where we were doing a warehouse overhaul. And I was looking at all of our automation. At that time, we didn't have a ton, but our fork trucks, at the time, the average age of our fork truck fleet was over 25 years old, the average. So to be able to say, hey, this is a safety conversation, like the risk of not updating some of these technologies is larger than the actual upfront investment. So having those really important conversations about what is relevant. When we're looking at the risk of not going, the other piece is, do your customers care? Right? If maybe you're in manufacturing and you don't understand what their needs are, maybe you have delivery windows that you're not able to meet, and now it's dinging you, like that's important conversations. So what we don't do is just as important as what we are about to do and try and make things better. Bring all levels of the organization into this conversation. If you have frontline associates who are part of your journey, this morning I know the woman from Five Below was mentioning they have their WOW team. The folks who are in the front line of their store who really look at what the customer needs and wants. Like, are you staying relevant? Are you getting the products to your customers in the time and the way that they want them? And if we're not meeting that, does that hurt our market share? Does that mean they're going to go buy it somewhere else? How do we stay relevant in a world where the customer is not always loyal? And so with that, work that into your story with your finance team. You want to make sure they're seeing the whole picture, not just lost sales, but risk and all the above. So now you're like, yes, I get it. I got some issues. Where do I start? There's so many different players. Obviously, we see this massive exhibit hall floor out there today, and we have all these different conversations we're having. I don't even know where to start, right? There's so much changing, and we all see, if you Google automation in warehouses or even automated robotic processing, things like that, the list is so long. So some of the approaches that we like to take and we work through is really understanding, once again, what is the point? What are we trying to accomplish at the end of today? Is it that we want that high-level service? Is it that we want on-time deliveries? We need to understand that vision before we can prioritize against all the different projects we have going on, right? We always say, like, if you have the unlimited amount of time and resources, you can do anything, but not everyone has that. Almost no one has that, right? And so we have to be realistic. We have to be looking at our priorities against what we have available to us. So this approach that we use with many of our practitioners, manufacturers, warehousers, consumer goods companies, all of the above. If you have not done a project or innovated in some time, you may not have any of these resources on hand, right? Like if no one in your organization has updated a system in over 5 years, that knowledge may not live within your four walls. And so how do you build a program? How do you strategize what that can look like? And so that's where we typically do the most love. I know one of our friends in the community often says that she gets called in after the 911 moment of, oh no, this sorter is about to go out, or we're about to lose this contract through this carrier. That's too late, right? Like we should be having these conversations up front, and that's the importance of having a program management approach. I actually want to ask on that. How many of you have technology teams in your company right now that are a product-based approach? By that, I mean they keep a backlog of improvements you want. They maintain your requirements of any systems you have. Does anyone have that approach in your company? I see a lot of like, ooh, faces as well. Okay, so we've got some, but I also saw some faces that were unsure of that. I do think that that's a really important conversation to be having with your technology teams, especially if you're from the operations side. It's like, hey, we keep telling you all these things we really care about. Are you keeping track of them for us? Or vice versa. If you're on the IT team and your ops people aren't telling you, I would definitely have a conversation with them and say, hey guys, like, we can't do everything tomorrow, but can you help us understand what the needs are and what pressures you're feeling? Admittedly, I will say, early in my career when I was in operations, before I moved over to the technology side, we definitely had some sayings about how headquarters would come up with ideas and then they didn't ask us. So don't be those people. Talk to make sure the communication ways are open between operations and IT, because that is how you're all gonna win together. So how do we prioritize against budget? We just said we can't do everything tomorrow. It's not going to happen overnight. So first off, do you have compliance timelines you're up against? Are you in like, say, pharma or a regulated industry that they're coming down with some regulation? That usually is top of the priority list because, that is an outside source telling us what we have to do. But after that, when we go down the list, we mentioned, are there major risks to the business? Is there some type of concern of not doing? And will it impede your business if you don't catch up? Moving down the list, is finance going to care how you spend money on technology if you're having to invest? Do they care that it's a one project capital expenditure, or do they care that if you have a new technology that's on, say, a SaaS licensing or things like that, and it's going to be a recurring expense? They're probably going to want to talk to you about that because it's going to hit their books, and they may not have understood some of these changes because in the past, many of us know, it might have been a capital expenditure, and many of them are shifting to this operating OpEx model. So have those conversations early. Make sure finance is not surprised because they do not like that, as I'm sure all of you know. But also, as you're going through this process, are there interdependencies? Like if you make one update, and you're saying, oh, we're going to get this great value out of it, but you don't update other things that are along the way, and then that's what's going to deter your value, you need to make sure that's well known amongst your executives, your finance team. Be very transparent. Hey, this is the tool that's going to get us there, but we can't do it alone. These two are 1 + 1 = 3, and if we only have one, it's really kind of like half. So be very transparent during that process, and especially in your learnings. Ask the vendors that you're talking to very candid questions. Hey, can I get there with just this one thing, or do I need something else to get me there? Oftentimes that will lead to further discussion because we always want to understand what are all the factors that tie into that value conversation. And this last point I think is actually really important, smaller wins. We all know how our teams can get excited, but morale goes up as fast as it goes down if we aren't transparent. So finding some of those small wins that we can have with our teams, that they can start seeing value, they can start really feeling incorporated. And I can't tell you how many times, especially when I was a frontline ops manager, that we would have, I was implementing a labor management in our facility, and I would bring, some of my pickers along with me. I'd be like, look, see this is the times and this is how it's changing. And they're like, wow, I did that? And I'm like, yeah, you did that. And they get so excited, and then they go and rally the troops. Your biggest opposers can become your biggest cheerleaders. So getting them involved early and often and helping them celebrate some of those small wins will help you and will help the morale of the team. And that is how you move projects along in a timely manner, is because, as many of us know, with technology, if everyone's not on the same page, it's a detractor, and that hurts us on timeline. So we want everyone to be in the journey with us and celebrating the wins together, even if they're small wins, even if they feel minor compared to the big project. Make sure people continue that momentum. It is really easy to get derailed if we're not letting them see the results. They are part of the team. They want to celebrate in the wins too with us. So if you have not done this in a while and maybe you're trying to figure out timeline, this is just an example timeline that you might use in an implementation after you've said, okay, this is the technology we want, but we don't know who the vendors are. Maybe we need to go do some discovery of what providers are out there, what do they bring. Maybe we need to run an RFI and ultimately decide maybe it's not the right fit. Maybe we thought this was the problem we were trying to solve, but maybe that's not the right route. If you go through a really true formulated process, it will help you kind of weed out what is going to benefit you long-term or not. And so if you need an example, this is just a template of what we do with many of our practitioners, our manufacturers and retailers in the space, as well as some 3PLs. So feel free to, if you have questions about this, feel free to jump in. But my kind of big takeaways for the session. So critical success factors when we are looking at any selection, new technology, new investments, be open to the fact that you don't know what you don't know, okay, right? Like, we're all here to learn. We know this industry changes a lot and constantly. So be receptive to always just asking the question of, like, well, why do we do it that way? Or how does that work that way? You are here already. Go out on the floor, ask people why they do what they do, how it works. Find some of your peers, you're all here to network, and ask them, hey, we're about to set out on a transportation journey. Have you recently gone through that? What did you do? How did you approach it? That is the beauty of these events. That is my favorite part about these events. Feel free to come over and geek out with me afterwards. We'll have some fun with it. But that is truly, I think, when you are receptive, I think Morris I think he said it this morning, is that when you're open to learning, that is when you are most receptive to what could be different, and I think it really gets your creative juices going. In terms of emerging technologies, sometimes we don't want to be the science project because we want to see how it plays out. But other times it could truly be a big differentiator. So really just exploring the unknown. Ask questions, asking about use cases. Maybe the way technologies, we saw it on the first slide, maybe the way they're used today isn't the way you guys would use them in your organization, but that's great too. Like, we always are looking for new ways to apply technologies because there is no one solo answer. And that is the beauty of supply chain, right? You fix one issue, you create another. That's just the story of all of our lives in this room. But we can do really cool things when we think outside of the box. I mentioned it before, but embracing the support of those who've been there before you. Talk to the friends in the room. Talk to the people at the conference. Come hang out with us after. We'll talk you through some of our learnings. I've been on quite a few journeys at this point, both across directly working for different consumer goods brands, as well as my span in consulting. you don't want to repeat other people's mistakes, right? You want to learn from those around you. So just go make the friends, have those conversations. Everyone is supportive, as you know, like we want each other to do better because that elevates all of us, right? The water rising lifts all, the tide rising lifts all boats. I mentioned it, bringing everyone together. This is not a solo adventure, right? They say that, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is a journey. This is why I called it Adventures. I hope you all liked the title of Adventures, but it is an adventure, right? Like we're setting out, we have an end goal. We want to get to the prize. We want to get to an amazing supply chain, but it is a journey. Let's learn from those. Let's communicate. Let's work as a team. If I'm operations, I want IT to help me be really efficient. If I'm IT, I need to understand what operations needs. So be friends. I know it's not always, organizations are not always built that way, but there is something to be said for opening the door and just saying, hey, IT, I know you're under a lot of strain lately. We're just trying to hit these numbers. Can we figure out a way that we can get there together? And really embrace those conversations, because they're the ones who are going to help you get there. And then lastly, have that candid conversation with finance, right? Many organizations talk about ROI. That's great. But if you are one of those organizations that you literally just can't be competitive anymore, or you're having an issue staying on top of things because they haven't made investments in your infrastructure in a while, just be really candid. Hey guys, the risk of us not going and replacing this automation or not bringing this in is that we start missing shipments or we're missing our numbers. So just being as forthcoming as you can. No one likes surprises. No one wants to get that call that, hey, a crane went down at 3 a.m. and we have no idea how to fix it because it's 20 years old and now we can't run our business and we're going to miss all these shipments. No one wants that call, right? Like I call 4 a.m. the witching hour when things break down. I think many of you know how that works and goes. So anyway, with that, I know I speed talk, so we moved through pretty quick, but what questions do we have? I saw facial expressions as we went, so I know people had thoughts.
I had a question about, yeah. You mentioned, so we're implementing a TMS. Mm-hmm. New for us.
Okay. Yeah.
Anything else you can suggest? I can sense there might be some pushback with learning the new system and maybe people who are long tenured employees. Is there any other advice you have in the implementation process?
Yeah, so I lived through a few TMS implementations. I think the most memorable one I had was when we started requiring our truck drivers to select their routes online. And this was before smartphones were a thing, so they had to go to a computer and log on and select their routes. We were in the infant days of smartphones. And so I went on ride-alongs. I put myself in the truck, I put myself on the bid board because so many of them fought me on it. And now they were stuck with me in their truck for 12 hours. And I just sat there and said, hey guys, like if your job was dependent on this, how would you do it? And they gave me the ideas. They were the ones who came back and said, I would post this up in the break room and then I'd have some of our drivers come and they would participate and then they could do the trainings because they know what we're living with. And so it's those little things that some of us overlooked as we were implementing. We were just like, hey, new technology, gonna make everyone's life easier. But for those who had been doing, they'd been calling the same admin at their 4-minute window every day for the last 30 years, and now they're having to log into a computer. Many of them didn't have computers at home. That was a world in which what we thought was the right thing, we needed to bring them with us. So we got computers set up in the break room, so that way on the day before we opened up bid windows earlier so that they could do that. Bring your folks along on that journey. Celebrate the things that they think are important, because the things we think are important are not always the things that our frontline associates think are important. So especially with a transportation management system, especially with folks who maybe are not in the office with you because they might be a driver, they might be a carrier that you work with, bring them in, have a friendly chat, put some simple snacks out and just be like, hey guys, we're gonna have open office hours. Come ask us questions. We want you to understand it. And then find who your cheerleaders are, the ones who say, oh, that's going to be so much better. And get them deployed out spreading the word, right? When you get those, especially if you have an opposer, bring them along, show them the value, help them understand why. People resist change when they don't understand the why. So if you help them understand, hey guys, like if we keep going this way, you won't find out your runs in enough time, or we're gonna have issues dispatching it. If they understand the why, they may not like it still. They may not love change, right? Like change, no one always loves change. But at least if they understand the why, they'll be amenable to the fact that it's, not that it's inevitable, but it's coming, and they can either fight it or they can embrace it and understand it. So that's how I've done it in the past, but I hope that helps.
Can I just add a few things?
Yeah.
So I work with Victoria, and we see a lot of people feeling very threatened as part of these implementations.
Yeah.
I think going in with a, this is why it's going to be good for you message, and your jobs are not going to be at risk, is kind of step one. I think you talked to the fear there. But the other one is when you get into UAT, make sure that they feel a level of ownership over the solution. This is your opportunity to say, no, I want it to work like this. No, if this field was over here. No, if I could just click into this screen.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the resistance off because they're feeling some level of ownership, or at least that you're listening right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So inclusion, I think, is what pivots from how do you get over the fear factor, and then how do you develop that level of ownership so people actually want to contribute over the longer term. It really sets you up for a much better level of success.
Yeah. And especially, you know, I had examples where I was, when I was running in a warehouse, where I had my trainers, like my frontline trainers, I brought them along first and said, hey guys, we're gonna play around. And then I had them bring in the earlier training classes, like the new training classes coming in, to experiment and have them kind of poke around and see how intuitive things were. And when they could figure it out really quick, the trainers went back to the floor and they're like, guys, they could pick it up that fast, you all can pick it up real fast. Like, so they become your cheerleaders and celebrate your wins with you too. But yes, thank you, Matt, for sharing that. What other questions do we have?
In a distribution environment, what do you think the best order is for the improvements when you're looking more like automation? Start with the WMS and then you build out robotics from there. Start further upstream in the WMS.
So the question was on the sequencing of when you're updating a distribution center, you know, WMS then automation or vice versa. It depends on if it's a brownfield or greenfield, and I say that because if it's a pre-existing facility that already has infrastructure and things, that's where I would really encourage doing a study of the flow of the site, of like, hey, if we are gonna add a belt here or add a goods to person AGV over here, like what does that do to my flow? So I would really encourage simulation before you switch anything up. When we're looking at both, you obviously want to understand the implications, right? Like, are there WMSs that maybe already have, you know, strong integration mappings with the automation you're looking at? Or maybe you have an automation that is unique to, you know, your facility or what you're trying to accomplish. I don't know that there's a better choice to go one or the other. I will say, if you tie in all your automation to a WMS and then change your WMS, you're repeating your work. So you typically want to understand both at the same time to make what's the best decision for your facility and your organization. But I just lived through this a while back where we were updating our racking and our cranes at the same time as changing our WMS, and we were trying to keep the timing together, and the timing was not staying together because one was taking longer than the other, and we had to keep flip-flopping our plan. We're like, okay, are we gonna test this one first, or is that one gonna go live? And so it was stressful, but I do think if you understand where your dependencies are early, it will make that much more manageable. So I know that's not a direct answer, but in a greenfield, you have a lot more flexibility because you have to have the WMS for the automation to work. Like, it's not going to know what it needs to move if you don't have direction. But yeah, every situation is dependent on how much automation is coming in and out and what's getting changed in the flow. So.
Do you find that once you pick one and you've done it, it prohibits others? Like, give me an example.
I would say something a little bit different. Don't pick one. Choose the buying preferences for all of them and what sequence they will go in. Build out the entire roadmap, and then you can march to that roadmap and you know all those interdependencies, so you don't have to worry about upsetting them over time.
It's hard if you're only doing one at a time. If you have a vision, right? Like, if you know, hey, at the end of the day, this is the vision of how we need to move goods, whether it be because you're trying to catch up to e-commerce or you have a manufacturing dependency of kitting and things like that, set the vision of the whole site first. If we do it piecemeal, it's a lot harder to go back and be like, well, we already installed it, let's go rip it out and move it over here now. So like Matt said, like if we understand the vision for the site instead of piecemeal, now that's not always in budget, right? Like you're not gonna just flip a switch and overnight have the budget, but if you have the vision up front, then you can set the long-term roadmap of how you're gonna get there. Anything I missed? Thanks, okay. We have a few minutes left. I'll be up here if you guys have more questions, but feel free to reach out and I'll definitely see you guys around the event. So thank you for coming. And don't forget to do your survey. There's in the app, there's a survey. You're welcome. We do listen to that. I sat on the conference committee for a few years. We do read all the feedback, which is how we change and add things and do things. So please do get feedback. Thank you.